1 minute ago, Oprah and Diddy's psychological game on Wendy Williams, finally exposed. Wendy Williams had a voice, and not just any voice, it was bold, raw, unfiltered. In the late 1990s, when polished hosts read scripts and smiled through secrets, Wendy did the opposite. She poked the beast. She named names. She asked questions no one dared. She wasn't supposed to rise like that. Oprah Winfrey had built an empire on charm, empathy, and control. Her throne wasn't just TV ratings, it was cultural authority. She was the queen, and she had no plans to share that spotlight. Then came Wendy. At first, Wendy's name was just an irritation, some loud radio DJ stirring controversy in New York. But then her reach grew. Her name gained traction in circles that were never meant to say it. She was pulling in listeners, breaking stories, challenging celebrities. She was unpredictable and unstoppable. What made her dangerous was this: Wendy didn't need approval. She didn't play the elite game. She was building her own rules, and that's when she became a problem. Behind closed doors, Oprah began watching. Not publicly, not on record, but through her network of industry insiders, managers, and silent eyes that tracked metrics. Wendy wasn't just gossip anymore, she was influenced. At this stage, Wendy had already clashed with some of Oprah's inner circle. Puffy P. Diddy, Mariah Carey, even Whitney Houston. Some had cut her off. Others wanted her canceled, but none succeeded. That's when Oprah changed tactics. She made a call. Then another. Quiet calls, powerful ones. The kind that didn't need explanations. Sean P. Diddy Combs was one of them. Oprah understood how power worked. You didn't need to be loud. You just needed the right hands to push the right levers. She needed someone who lived in both the streets and the boardrooms, someone like Diddy. He owed her favors, and he shared her problem with Wendy. Diddy had clashed with Wendy years prior. She questioned him on air, probed into rumors he'd buried, and challenged his image. He hated it. But more importantly, he feared what she might say next. With Oprah's blessing, a silent alliance was formed. The mission was simple: dismantle Wendy. Not through a lawsuit, not through direct confrontation. That would only give her more power. Instead, it would be psychological, strategic, and slow. They would chip away at her reputation, undercut her alliances, starve her of opportunities. It was a Hollywood execution, quiet, lethal, and utterly deniable. The first blow came on the radio. In the early 2000s, Wendy was suddenly dropped from Hot 97 in New York. Officially, it was due to internal violations. Unofficially, it was pressure. Behind the scenes, sponsors were told to pull out. Executives were warned to avoid her. Diddy had influence in music. Oprah had influence in media. Together, they ensured doors began to close. But Wendy didn't fall. She moved to another station, rebuilt her audience, and doubled down on her unfiltered style. This resilience irritated Oprah. In her mind, Wendy was a threat that wouldn't fade. She needed something stronger. That's when darker methods were whispered. Hollywood has always had its shadows, rituals, whispers, energy work. Oprah, despite her clean image, was no stranger to the undercurrents. She had access to those who practiced in secret, the old magic, ancestral, manipulative, and terrifyingly effective. Wendy began to feel the shift. She reported unexplained illness, energy drains, headaches, a constant feeling of being watched, blocked, suppressed. Her dreams were strange, her energy changed, but she never connected it, never fully. Meanwhile, Oprah smiled in interviews, gave speeches, hosted philanthropists, and Wendy. She fought to stay on air, to remain visible. But she didn't know she was fighting something she couldn't see. Years later, as her show went national and her fame peaked, Wendy should have been winning, but that's when everything truly began to unravel. Wendy Williams had survived the first wave barely. She was still on air, still loud, still unfiltered, but she was different. The fire was still there, but the clarity wasn't. Something invisible was draining her, and she didn't yet realize the war wasn't over. It had just changed form. While the media saw her as a provocateur riding the heights of daytime TV behind the scenes, the campaign to break her moved into the next phase, collapse her foundation. And that began with her home. Kevin Hunter had always been by Wendy's side. He was her husband, her manager, and her producer. Together they had built her empire. But trust doesn't survive in poisoned air, and Wendy's world had been quietly poisoned for years. The pressure from outside, the whispers, the subtle discredits, and the energy attacks, Wendy carried them all home. She wasn't just fighting the industry anymore. She was fighting her body, her mind, her sense of control. The smallest cracks widened under stress, and Kevin, he had already started slipping through. By 2017, Wendy's public persona began to show strain. Fans noticed moments of confusion, slurred speech, long pauses. Rumors of substance use returned, but the truth was more complicated. Kevin had started living a double life, 1 foot in Wendy's empire, 1 foot in a secret affair. His mistress, Sharina Hudson, wasn't just another scandal. She was a symbol of betrayal, a slow-moving time bomb that Oprah's circle was more than happy to let tick. Because Kevin was exploitable. Oprah didn't need to bribe him. She just needed to make sure he felt powerful, needed validated outside of Wendy. If he self-sabotaged, all the better, and he did. In 2019, after 22 years of marriage, Wendy found out Kevin had not only cheated, but fathered a child with the other woman. The pain was personal, but the timing was strategic. Wendy's show was under renewal talks. Her image was in flux. Sponsors were wary. Tabloids swarmed. And while Wendy took a public hiatus, a private spiral began. Alcohol returned like an old friend. She checked herself into a sober living facility. But even there, peace didn't follow. Sources later whispered that during her rehab stay, people from outside showed up, not friends, not family, spiritual practitioners. Women Wendy didn't recognize, who spoke in soft riddles and wore scent-heavy oils. Oprah's people perhaps, or Diddy's shadows, we'll never know. But what followed was unmistakable. Wendy came back hollow. Her show limped forward. Ratings dipped. Producers changed. Guest hosts were brought in just in case. And Oprah, she remained distant, silent, publicly gracious. But her presence hung like smoke. Her network OWN had already begun absorbing certain daytime segments. Other black female hosts rose, all under her mentorship. The unspoken message: there's only room for one queen. Wendy, stripped of personal and professional stability, became isolated. And that isolation was the true strategy. Because without allies, without clarity, and without energy, Wendy was easy to finish. In late 2020, the energy attacks escalated. Insiders spoke of erratic behavior, unexplained memory lapses. Wendy would repeat stories, forget names, lose track of live broadcasts. Some called it burnout. Others whispered substance relapse. But the most spiritual among her crew believed something else. She was under spiritual siege. One assistant, fired shortly after, claimed Wendy kept seeing dark figures in her mirrors. Another recalled her crying in a corner saying, "I'm not alone, and it's not God." Security cameras in her dressing room allegedly caught flickering lights, dropped audio, and unexplained glitches. Files would disappear from teleprompters. One day her script showed up entirely blank, with only the phrase, "It's time." She shook it off, or tried to. But the layers were too many: betrayal at home, instability at work, and now reality itself felt unreliable. By 2021, Wendy's body began to fail. Diagnosed with Graves' disease and lymphedema, her physical appearance changed. Her face bloated, her energy dropped. She needed a chair to stand, yet she pushed on filming episodes until she physically couldn't. In October 2021, Wendy vanished from her own show. Officially, she was resting, but sources knew better. She was being phased out. Producers brought in Sherry Shepherd, Leah Remini, and others to test the waters. Diddy's old circle people, with old favors to return, were quietly advising the replacement strategy. The industry had already chosen a successor. Wendy was just a name now, a brand in transfer. In June 2022, the Wendy Williams show was officially canceled, and with it, she lost the rights to her own brand. 20 years of work erased, rebranded, absorbed. Oprah's playbook had worked before. Isolate, discredit, destabilize, absorb, and here it worked again. But there was one more layer to fall her money. In 2023, Wells Fargo froze Wendy's accounts. The claim she was mentally unfit to manage her finances. A judge agreed. Wendy was placed under financial guardianship, the kind usually reserved for those with degenerative illnesses or elder dementia. She no longer had access to her own bank accounts, credit cards, or contracts. Her team, half loyal, half suspect, controlled her entire financial life. The spiritual war had turned legal. She was alive, but she wasn't free. Meanwhile, Oprah's empire expanded. Her protégés gained airtime. The space Wendy once occupied was now filled by controlled, polished voices, never too raw, never too threatening. Diddy kept quiet. He knew better. His own world was starting to crack, but Wendy's destruction had bought him time. The whisper in Wendy's mind, if it could form words, might have asked, was it always meant to end like this? When Wendy Williams disappeared from her show, the world assumed it was exhaustion, illness, maybe burnout. But those closest to her knew something deeper was unraveling, a dismantling that felt less like fate and more like orchestration. In 2022, while Wendy's finances were locked and her name erased from the show that bore it, whispers swirled through the industry. Where is Wendy Williams? The question wasn't just about location. It was about presence, power, and truth. Then came the cameras. HBO Max began production on a documentary about her life, a project originally meant to be a celebratory comeback. Instead, it became a eulogy in real time. As filming progressed, it revealed a woman disoriented, confused, and physically diminished. Her memory flickered. Her thoughts wandered. There were moments of brilliance, then deep fog. It was not the Wendy the world remembered. Behind every cut, producers debated ethics, were they witnessing decline or showcasing it? But one thing was certain, the film would answer the question everyone asked. And it did. February 2024. Wendy's family released a public statement. She had been diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia (FTD), a progressive neurodegenerative disease that affects personality, behavior, and language. It explained the memory lapses, the outbursts, the confusion. It explained why she vanished. But to those who believed in spiritual warfare and energy manipulation, it explained more than that. This wasn't natural, one former assistant said anonymously. This wasn't just biology. Something got to her. Wendy's decline had followed every textbook pattern of a long game attack. Isolate, destabilize, discredit, dismantle. And now, with her diagnosis, she was effectively silenced. No comeback, no rebuttal. Just fading. Oprah Winfrey never commented publicly. She didn't need to. Her image remained pristine. Her empire grew. Her networks expanded with new talk show hosts, mentored, manicured, and never disruptive. Diddy stayed quiet too. But cracks had begun to show in his world. Allegations, lawsuits, and federal investigations into his past behaviors began bubbling in 2023. Whispers of trafficking, manipulation, and abuse surfaced. Many of the same tactics Wendy had once questioned publicly. Now the world was catching up. One segment in the HBO documentary showed an old interview clip, Wendy in her prime, asking Diddy a question that made him visibly uncomfortable. He had dodged it. She pressed harder. She was the only one who ever did that, the documentary narrator said. And for that, many believed she paid the price. Privately, some began asking the real question. Was Wendy's decline truly medical, or was it induced dark magic, energy manipulation, intentional poisoning? None of it could be proven. But in Hollywood, where secrets are currency and rituals are real, The impossible was always just a matter of exposure. Insiders recalled moments when Wendy said strange things. "I can feel people pulling at me. I dream in someone else's voice. They want me gone, but I don't know who they is." Now those words felt chillingly literal. In a leaked deposition from 2023, a former executive linked to own Oprah's network described internal conversations from years prior. Wendy's name came up. The memo read, "Brand risk, unmanageable, uncontrolled narrative, must contain." Another line read, "Influence incompatible with long-term ecosystem." The implication: Wendy was more than competition. She was a threat to the brand structure Oprah had built over decades. Meanwhile, Wendy's estate was now controlled by financial guardianship. Her decisions, medical, legal, financial, were made by others. She had family, yes, but power of attorney had slipped to court-appointed strangers. This arrangement was justified legally, but spiritually it felt like the final shackle. Her voice, once the loudest on daytime TV, now existed only in reruns, yet not everyone believed it was over. A small but growing group of her fans and spiritual supporters began gathering online Reddit threads, TikTok clips, independent podcasts. They called themselves the Echoes. Their belief Wendy's story wasn't one of simple decline. It was one of assassination, spiritual, social, and psychological, and they vowed to keep telling it. Some even believed Wendy might return. People forget one Echo member posted that energy never disappears. It just changes form. Wendy may be silent now, but her energy still ripples. And the ones who silenced her, their reckoning is coming. By late 2024, Diddy's legal troubles worsened. Federal raids, seized properties, former associates turning witness. The mogul image cracked hard, and Oprah. For the first time in years, she began canceling public appearances. Rumors swirled, a health issue, a privacy retreat, or perhaps a fear that her own name was finally being whispered in rooms it had long controlled. Wendy's documentary ended not with a farewell, but with a freeze frame, her last coherent sentence to the camera. "I told the truth. That's all I ever did." Then silence. And yet through that silence, the story had only just begun. By early 2025, the Echoes were no longer just a fan movement. They had become a decentralized investigative collective. Reddit threads turned into research hubs. TikTok videos layered card readings with timelines. Former insiders began dropping hints in DMs. They weren't journalists. They weren't spiritualists. They were both, and their target Oprah. What began as a quiet questioning of Wendy's fall had evolved into a methodical excavation of an empire. The Echoes weren't claiming Oprah was guilty of a crime, not directly, but they were mapping a pattern, a matrix of career collapses and character assassinations that all seemed to benefit the Queen of Daytime. And Diddy was always lurking nearby. They started connecting dots. 1999. Wendy was fired from Hot 97 after a string of controversial interviews. One of those interviews, Diddy, 2001. Oprah's network begins recruiting talent for OWN. Certain names like Wendy were quietly blacklisted, 2018. Wendy's marriage collapses publicly, and industry whisperers report a cold war between her and Oprah intensifying behind closed doors. 2022. Wendy's health deteriorates. Guardianship begins. OWN launches several shows in her time slot. Coincidence, maybe. But as one Echo account wrote, "You don't need a smoking gun to recognize a pattern. You just need to step back far enough to see the whole picture." In March 2025, an anonymous whistleblower, claiming to be a former spiritual advisor linked to Diddy's inner circle, posted a thread that went viral. Wendy was marked, it began. There were rituals, there were names, she was one of them. The post detailed alleged meetings in the early 2000s between Oprah, Diddy, and two unnamed Hollywood figures, where they discussed preserving the hierarchy of influence among black media royalty. Wendy's rise, according to the Post, was seen as a disruption. Oprah didn't just fear Wendy, the thread continued. She feared what Wendy represented: a voice outside the gatekeepers, a voice that couldn't be controlled. Reddit went wild. That same month, a former OWN producer, one who had been let go in 2023, leaked documents to an independent media blog. Among them, an internal memo listing high-risk disruptors: Wendy Williams, Monique, Tyrese. Each name was marked with annotations: PR volatile, difficult to align, controls their own narrative. And beneath Wendy's name, disarm, redirect, replace. In April, a private investigator working with the Echoes released aerial drone footage of a secluded California compound owned by one of Oprah's holding companies. The footage revealed structures not registered on public zoning maps. A ritual space, they alleged, a place of energy work. Of course, the mainstream media dismissed it. But the footage, paired with accounts from spiritual whistleblowers, rekindled conspiracy theories that Oprah, much like Diddy, engaged in dark metaphysical practices to solidify her influence. Suddenly, videos from years prior resurfaced. Oprah speaking of calling on ancestors, of intentional manifestation, of cutting cords. In a new context, those words felt ominous. Then came the podcast leak. A former associate of Diddy, in a recorded conversation, described an off-the-books operation, a campaign to quietly dismantle Wendy's credibility between 2019 and 2021. The tactics included targeted rumors, legal pressure, and media partnerships that would subtly push the narrative of decline. She was supposed to burn out, he said. Make it look natural, not forced. The interview, posted anonymously to SoundCloud, was taken down within 12 hours. But by then, it had been downloaded tens of thousands of times. Oprah remained silent. Diddy no statement, but the silence was no longer enough. The FBI's investigations into Diddy's empire expanded. Allegations of trafficking, embezzlement, coercion, all gaining steam. Suddenly, Wendy's name popped up again, this time in unsealed documents. She had been one of the first to raise concerns about certain parties, certain patterns. It seemed she'd known too much. In May 2025, a legal bombshell. A civil suit was filed by Wendy's legal team on her behalf, under guardianship, against entities connected to Bad Boy Entertainment, OWN Productions, and a third party listed as Public Influence Facilitator LLC. The allegations: defamation, financial interference, intentional infliction of emotional distress. It wasn't just about justice, it was about naming names. And for the first time, the paperwork made something clear. Wendy wasn't just a fallen star, she had been a target. The media responded cautiously. Some labeled it a publicity stunt. Others noted the uncomfortable timing, with Oprah beginning to withdraw from upcoming speaking engagements and Diddy's legal calendar filling rapidly. The narrative was shifting, and the echoes were louder than ever. They began organizing rallies, virtual at first, then real. Justice for Wendy signs appeared at courthouse steps. A GoFundMe for her legal support raised $2 million in a week. Fans wrote letters, made art,